to It's About Time Conversations with Charlize and Yolanda, where we bring our experiences and our expertise to the table to address relevant topics that impact our lives and our communities. This is the place to be authentic, be transparent, and be inspired. Welcome to our virtual table, and I am Charlize Lewis.
And I am Yolanda Mason. And today our show is going to center on National Reading Month and the importance of literacy, that is both reading and writing, and advocating for our youth in all areas of their development. We are blessed to have as our special guest today, Mrs. Melissa Benford, who is a former elementary school teacher, a former assistant elementary principal, a mother of two girls, and an instrumental voice in the area of literacy and learning in various youth organizations. She hails from Baltimore, Maryland, by way originally of Versailles, Kentucky, and we are just so excited to have her here with us today. So, Melissa, tell us a little bit about your journey in education. We just want to hear about your passion in the field and everything about that, and then kind of this new path that encompasses the community and the outreach aspect.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate you being here. I started with elementary education, always wanted to be a teacher as far back as I can remember. I remember in church on Children's Day, you got to pick which ministry you wanted to shadow. And I always wanted to be a Sunday school teacher. So I remember sitting in the basement in First Baptist with my Aunt Ruth, helping her teach her class. And I have always just had a passion for giving people new information, making people think. It's so empowering when you can see on someone's face that they've gotten some knowledge that can change their life. So it's just always been something that I wanted to do. I started my career in Fayette County Public Schools, taught primary grades, and then relocated to Baltimore because of my husband's job and continued teaching elementary education here. I have a master's in counseling, so I was actually a school counselor as well for 6 years. I did that and then moved into administration, kind of wanting a bigger impact. I think once I moved out of the classroom into counseling and saw all of the needs of children that the school system is expected to meet, I kind of wanted to go bigger. So in administration, it allowed me to be the chairperson of special education, the chairperson of the gifted and talented program, being over state-run testing, a lot of things that people talk about, but really don't know the inner workings of that. So when my oldest daughter was born, who will be 12 in June, I continued to work, and being here with no family, that was a tough balance. And, God had called me to step away from that and serve my family. I also at that time had some concerns about my daughter. She was around 1, and I was seeing a delay in speech. So it was one of those things where I also felt like this is something that I need to look into. So initially I was just going to take a year off, but I began to work with her and explore all the avenues available for services for her at such a young age. And luckily had that information because I had just served as chair of special education. So with that, just really a passion for continuing to advocate. And special education, I had seen parents come with attorneys and advocates and armed with all this information. And I saw how much they were able to accomplish when they were informed. So I took that and really worked with my daughter to make sure that she got what she needed. So once she got into school, my youngest daughter, who's 8, got into school, I still just had that passion. When I was a classroom teacher, every lesson I did was based on a book. And when I used a book, I tried to make a real life connection. I remember one time I did a huge theme on the Kentucky Derby. Charlize came as Derby Princess and talked about her experience, just making that connection to let kids see that if you want to know about something, if you want to experience something, a book is really all you need. If you can start there, and if you're lucky enough to get there, you'll be prepared. So just a love for children's books and reading to children and empowering them the best way we can. So once my children went to school, I found other ways, whether it be with the Parent Association, Girl Scouts of America, and other organizations, ways to give back and try to give all children the opportunity to have those experiences, still be able to uh, express my love for teaching and the joy I have in seeing kids learn.
Wow. So thank you. It just seems like you've had just a wide array of experiences in education. And I like how you talked about how your experiences actually begin to lend themselves.
Yes.
When you saw that your daughter may be having some issues. And I think that's really powerful, because I heard you say that being armed with that knowledge made you able to really help your daughter at the age that she needed to be, as opposed to sometimes when parents don't have that knowledge, they're not able to intervene at that early age. And we know through research and evidence-based practice that the earlier you can get on those small issues, the better opportunity they have.
Right. And a lot of parents don't know that. A lot of parents don't know that special education federally starts at birth. There's a whole program for birth to 5. And a lot of parents don't know that. And they think that their child may have concerns or may have needs. And they think they have to wait till they get to school. And actually waiting till they get to school is really it's almost too late.
Right.
If you can start, you can start as early as 6 months and they're getting services, or 1 year of age, they're getting services. And even, I have to admit, with my experience with my oldest, I was somewhat hesitant. I saw my concerns, I voiced my concerns. I got a little pushback. So I didn't act maybe as quickly as I would have, but it wasn't too late. It was before she was 2.
That's good.
But when I think back, I probably would have started when she was probably around 8 months.
A few months.
And when I was seeing these things. So the difference was with my second child, I saw she had the speech, she was talking, but when we got to the phase of where you take them from baby food to table food, she wouldn't eat the table food. So I went to the pediatrician, said, she's not eating table food. And he said, well, a lot of times children just like how quick it is to eat baby food. So they really don't, go quickly to table food. But if you wait her out, she'll eat it if she's hungry. So I remember waiting her out and seeing her physically change. And it dawned on me, she can't eat this. So this time, I didn't wait for anybody to tell me, okay. This time, I called the pediatric hospital close by, called the oral motor clinic, scheduled the appointment, and then called my pediatrician and announced what I had done to get the support moving forward. And to come to find out, which is a similar part of the brain with the speech delay, she had an oral delay. We had to I had to take her to the hospital once a week to teach her how to eat, how to
digest.
And people think that seems so natural, but that's really a part of the brain to put something in your mouth.
Yes.
Know to move it to the side of your mouth. Know to chew it until you can swallow it without choking. And do that repeatedly. That's a skill that she did not have. So for about 6 months, once a week, was at the pediatric hospital. And again, using the Child Find Resources, which is the federal program for children birth to 5, to also get her in-home services. So I was able, which everybody's not able to do, but I was able to have private services and public services to really kind of give her that advantage. And I have to tell you, it was a surprise to them to see a mother prepared. I don't want to say armed, but armed with knowledge. And knowing what the guidelines are, knowing what the timeline is. And that made my heart ache, because I thought to myself, how many parents are intimidated by that and stop at the first no. And one person tells you no, and you just go back home, instead of, as we were talking about earlier, finding somebody who will listen to what you're saying and consider what you're saying and look at your child and what their needs are. And that happens to so many children, disproportionately children in brown and Black communities, or living below the poverty line. Happens all the time.
Yes.
People talk about the achievement gap. And I always say this, I think people think that children come in kindergarten, everybody's on an even playing field. And by the time you get to 3rd grade, there's a huge gap. But I was so surprised when I started teaching, how many children were so far behind when they got there? And then you have this expectation of me and everybody else to get them where they need to be when they came years behind. So that's just such a huge disadvantage. And something as simple as literacy can give your child some type of an advantage. Maybe you can't do, some of the things that are costly, but if you can look at your local resources that are free, local programs that are free, local services that are free, because the government pays for a lot of this.
Yes.
You can give your child some type of advantage when it comes to being prepared for school.
But just think about that. You're talking about some of the basic things. You're
Yeah.
not even to the academic piece
Right.
they get once they get in
Right.
the building.
Right.
And so that's interesting to me. You're talking about development
Right.
that people, first of all, take for granted.
Yes.
Second of all, it's interesting to me that you said you also there in that I heard a bit of a comparison between your kids and how kids are not always the same.
Right.
They don't respond the same, they don't
Right.
move the same, they don't reason the same. And
Right.
of course, I only have the one kid. So I had to compare her to other kids in the family or
Right.
other kids at the school. And I realized my kid was actually a little bit more advanced in a lot of areas, but that also was about being cultured around older people.
Yeah.
She's just around older people, so her reasoning skills, her verbal skills, all those things were like my mother.
Right. Right.
And so you have to consider the impact of environment on kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one thing that I say that I do think, it's funny, my daughter just asked me, my oldest just asked me the other day, if you had one regret, what would it be? Or if you could do something different. I can't think how she worded it. And I said, well, one thing I would have done, I think maybe would have been when you were younger, I would have moved back home. I said, because I think I didn't realize how much children just learn vicariously from being in certain environments. When you're somewhere and you don't have any family, you're a little more conservative about exposure.
Absolutely.
And you don't realize how much you learned just because you was at your grandmama's house, or you was over your cousin's house, or because your aunt used to watch you, or you were here, you were all these places. So your parents weren't having to teach you everything. They could entrust you to other people and you would just naturally, now as they got older, I began to really take advantage of my resources. So we would go, come to Kentucky every summer. And my father taught them how to ride a bike. My father taught them how to tie their shoe. I told my mother I need them to learn this. I told my sister, when I come, I want you to work on this, because I realized, I cannot teach them everything. You need a village, you need help. As they got a little older, I found other resources for that, whether it was our church family or a mother's organization, other ways to get that done. But it takes a village. It takes a village. And I know some people don't have all of those resources, but if you can find somebody to partner with you, if it's your mother can help you, if your sister can help you, if you got a good girlfriend who can help you, if it's your child's godparent that can help you, you got to pull your resources inside and outside of the school, because you have to be seen, you have to be heard, you have to be assertive. You can't wait until, there's a problem. A lot of people think if there's no problem, then I can just go with the flow. Don't go with the flow. People know, for example, at my children's school, the first conference day is November. My first conference day is the first week of October, because I think if you're telling me something in November, that's too late. I'm giving you 4 weeks. Tell me what you think. Don't wait till parent conference day. And even if you haven't heard anything, still, this is my face. I just want you to see me. Tell me what your concerns are. What do you see as strengths and weaknesses? So you'd be surprised what teachers are thinking already, and maybe you can add to it. You'd be surprised maybe what teachers have heard from former teachers that you can, clarify. You can talk about what you're doing, but you have to be seen. Their conference day is the first week in November. Each parent is assigned 20 minutes. So by the time we get to November, this is my second conference. I make it clear, once you've scheduled all your conferences, please let me know your availability for at least a 30-minute conference, because I cannot speak about my children in 20 minutes. I'm flexible. I'll do it before school, after school, whenever you want to do. But I can't be pushed for time. I cannot be rushed. I have questions. Sometimes, let me tell you in advance what I want to know when we meet, so that I give you time to get the information. You have to advocate for your children, and you'll be surprised the response you get when they see that you're going to do that and you're consistent. Because a lot of times parents don't do that, and particularly parents of color. We, typically sometimes because of our own struggles with school or, intimidated, sometimes we're hesitant. And I just know that from my personal experience. A lot of times my parents of color, I didn't see them. They didn't come. And now everybody's not just at home, they're at work. They're at work. Mm-hmm. But if you tell a teacher, this is my time, I have a lunch break, or I can meet at this time, a lot of times they'll work with you. And that's why I said, build your community. Maybe your mother has to do the conference for you. Maybe it has to be by phone. Maybe, do what works for you. But when they see your child, they have to instantly be able to see your face, know where you work, know how to get in touch with you, so that they see that your child's not alone, you're walking beside them.
Yeah, and I think that first of all, there's just been so many jewels in what you've said so far. It's kind of amazing because you hit on some themes that I cannot overlook. One of which being this concept of relationship when it comes to the teachers in the school. Again, the teacher needs to know, and this is particularly for our listeners and those who will watch this later, the teacher needs to know who you are. Yes. The teacher needs to understand your schedule. The yes. teacher needs to understand the unique nuances of your house and Absolutely. What is happening at home. It is important for the teacher to know if you are a single mom or even a single dad, yes. Because these are the kind of things that will play into how we navigate the school year. The other thing that you brought up, and again, you've brought up so many brilliant points. So many more people need to hear what you're saying. You brought up the issue of access. So when we find children who live at the intersections of race, socioeconomic status, even gender, we find that as those disadvantages stack up, there has to be more intentionality to address what will make the student successful. Again, I'm a social worker. That's what I've studied for the last 6 years. And what I found is that children are such a product of their environment. I can point to just the impact of poverty on the brain of a child, right. The impact of poverty on access to the kinds of tools and resources that children need to be successful. And so what I heard you say is wherever there are those gaps, don't let those gaps hinder you, but find how you can fill those gaps in. And that's something that I pray that, it just truly touched my heart, because for me, that's the work that I do, filling in those gaps, advocacy. And I know that there are parents who are listening who think, well, I don't know if I can approach the teacher. And I love that you said, no, I firmly but politely tell the teacher what I need. So no, I can't talk about my 2 children in 20 minutes. I do need a bit of extra time. Right. No, I cannot do this during this part of the day. Is there any way we can do something on the end of the day if that would help? Or I have an hour lunch break. Can you accommodate me during your planning period? And I want to say that most teachers, and I am going to jump out on a limb and say most, because I know that a lot of folks can be pretty tough on teachers. Absolutely. But I have found with my 3 nephews, who are all 3 Black boys in different age ranges, and there's this whole thing that comes with that anyway in the school system because of culture. I will say that, but I found that I've never seen a teacher who would not go above and beyond. I can honestly say that. And one of my friends said, oh no, that can't be true. It is true. And the reason it's true is because their mother, my sister, and myself, we make those phone calls. They know who we are. They text us. They call us. They know that they are not to wait until things fall apart, So I just want to thank you, Melissa, for saying that, because I feel like as a mother and an educator, what you just said is even more important than you could imagine, because I feel like someone listening will be empowered to say, okay, I can have that conversation. Absolutely. I can say what works or does not work for me. So that was powerful. I just couldn't let that moment pass without acknowledging that, because we're just getting there to understand our own power as Black parents, particularly as parents of color, not just Black, but parents of color as well. But so I kind of want to go into another conversation, because we talked about literary skills. And again, this is something that's huge for me, because I was the kid, my parents made me a bookworm. Yes. I absolutely, I had so many books that I wouldn't get in
Yes.
trouble for watching TV at night when I was supposed to be asleep. I'd get in trouble for being under my bed. That's why I would have these glasses on. I would be under my bed with like a flashlight reading books. I
Right.
loved all the books,
Right.
Berenstain Bears, Ramona and her sister, the Quimby's. You know, that's why I learned to have language. That's why I learned to be articulate. And my parents got me so many books, I didn't even have room to hold them. So I want to talk with you about literacy, because you said, and rightly so, that literacy skills provide this foundation to help to help students be more verbal, to help students to understand and begin to develop comprehension and all of those things. So we know that literacy skills are very important. But what I would like to know from you as a former educator and you know, for our listeners, what are other skills and competencies that students really need to be able to master as part of their development? Because I think that our parents don't always know exactly what kinds of skills lend themselves to making a well-rounded student. Can you speak to that?
Well, and I actually think, again, a lot of that starts with literacy. Little things that you can do early on with your child. For example, I know they probably watch TV no matter what your socioeconomic status is. Put every show on closed caption. You'd be surprised what children know just by seeing words over and over
That's
and
good.
over.
I would have never thought of that.
And then they get to school, the teacher says a word, they don't know how to spell it. They'll say, I've seen that word. Or they've heard it so much in context on TV that when the teacher uses it, I know that word. So it could be something as simple as that. I say read to them every single day. And if you don't have books, whatever, if you I know you have a cell phone, Google, a children's newsletter, children magazine, something, read to them. I started reading chapter books to my children when they turned 4. They couldn't read them, but I could read them. And the one thing that I heard every time they went to school is they have exceptional listening skills. Because I had them at 4, no pictures, listen to me and follow this story mentally. Sharpens you. Now that teaches you to be able to follow the lecture in science, follow the lecture in math. When you do your word problems in math, you understand how words work. That teaches so much attention. You can, after you read to them, ask them questions. For the longest time, when my children have a chapter book, I get 2 copies, I'm reading it too. So then we talk about the book, talk about stuff. You'd be surprised the little things you can do. Of course, in the kitchen, if you're cooking something, have them read the recipe. Little things like that. And there's so much in books, in magazines. When I was younger, my father every week would come home with a Newsweek or a Time magazine. I had to read it during the week. Could not go outside on Saturday until I could talk about what was in there. Now, I could not stand that. But now I get up every day and read at least 3 newspapers, because now I need to know about current events. So you'd be surprised the little things you can do. Or if you're reading an article that's, not gruesome or anything, read it out loud to your kid. Come here, let me tell you about this. If you know there's something going on in the community, maybe you want to take them to free things, and there's a website that you go to. Get them to help you with the website. Print out what's on the website if you can. Let them find stuff for you. The calendar, put a calendar up on the refrigerator. Show them how to use the calendar. There are so many little things that you do every day in your home that you don't realize are life skills, that if you can just engage your child early, that gives them an advantage of being able, to do those things. You go in any classroom, K through 12, there's a calendar wall. Today is, tomorrow is, next week is this. If your child's been talking about the schedule since they were 3, they're going to roll with that.
Sure.
They're going to roll with that. And every public library has programs like that, and programs at the library are free. Go to your local library, look and see. Now you might have to register, but they're free. Take your kid to do it once a month if you can. All of these things, you'd be surprised. And when you can see what your child's interest is, if you can find a way to make connections to every subject with that, that helps too. That helps too. And again, communicating to teachers, letting teachers know things. If your child has an interest, tell the teacher. My daughter loved jokes when she was little. So I made sure I emailed the school librarian. Audrey really likes jokes. When she comes on Thursday, can you have a few books out for her to look through? Showing her, we've got a public library, we've got books here. You've got library at school, but that librarian also serves a purpose. That's also a place where you go. If you can express your interest, she can help you. So you have to show children how to be resourceful and see, and what's around them. And I know a lot of parents don't have that information, but again, every school, you either have a counselor or you have a social worker. Sometimes the social worker's in the building, sometimes they're not. There's an army of people that will help you. There's nothing wrong with calling and saying, this is what I'm thinking, but I don't know what to do with it. I mean, you have to utilize all those resources that you have. Now, you may run into somebody who's difficult. Okay, then go to the next person.
Sure.
Don't limit your child's experience at that particular school, because that school is part of a system. So if you've got a social worker that you're trying to get to help you and she's not very helpful, well, if you go to the school system's website, there's somebody over social workers. Then you call them and they will help you. Do not stop until somebody helps you. And sometimes you have to make that call to show, I will go outside this building if there's something that I need for my child. But then you also get a different response the next time that you go to advocate for your child.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the librarian too, Melissa. I have to say this, but I'm going to throw it to Charlize. But I just saw an interview, it's like 2 days ago. And it was Denzel Washington, and Denzel was talking about how a librarian changed his life. Yeah. So he was in New York City, and he was on the Jimmy Fallon show, and Jimmy Fallon shows him a picture of a little lady. She was so cute, and she had books in her hands, and she was sitting beside Denzel, and he said, "Do you remember this person?" And Denzel said, "Oh my God, this was the lady who gave me my first library card." And he was someone who, as we know, because we have watched his career, he's very intelligent and extremely articulate, but his parents worked a lot. And so he needed someone to help him develop language skills and develop his reading skills. And so it was his librarian. And there's no shame in that. His parents were simply working. And I say that, and I raised it just because you talked about this before. Parents sometimes have this guilt, like, oh, I can't do A, B, or C. But that librarian, they do get paid to be there. Yes. So if you can even drop your child off while you go do what you need to do, library is always a very safe place, for one thing.
Absolutely.
For two, they typically have security. I know the one in my town does. And for three, your child can immerse in learning and reading and get their library card and use the computer. So I think that that's amazing. Like, again, what you're saying, I think you're empowering parents so much by what you say, and that's powerful. Really powerful.
I had to write this down, or otherwise I would forget it, because I'm getting older. So you said something that was really key, and I was like, let me write it down. I'm going to lose it. I remember when Chloe was younger and we would take her to a restaurant. And you know how kids are. They want to know what can they order and this, that, and the other. So we would get her a children's menu and not order for her.
That's right.
The children's menu has pictures on it.
Yep.
So she knew how to make that connection because of the pictures. She couldn't read it 3 or 4.
That's right.
But by the time she was 7 and 8, she could read exactly what it was and say, I'm going to mark this, I'm going to mark that. Because, children's menus, they have the check boxes.
Yes.
And people would be so amazed that she could go in a restaurant. That's what she used to call it, restaurant. And she would go in there and say, Mom, I want this. I don't want the cheese, but I want this type of noodle. And she would be able to mark those things.
Right.
But those are just basic things that some people just don't think of. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Absolutely. Right. And you can do that with the drive-through too. When you go to, if you're going through a drive-through, if your child always gets the same thing, for one, let them order themselves. And then sometimes tell them what you want to make them order. That's listening skills. And now I'm going to tell you what you want. You're going to say it back. They're going to repeat it. Little things like that. And I tell parents, don't get in the whole thought of, well, it may slow down the line, or it may do, it's probably slow anyway. You know what I mean? So just go ahead and make it an opportunity for your child to have some type of experience with, communicating. My kids, by the time they went to kindergarten, on their wall listed, they had memorized so many scriptures. I mean, that is with memory. Just that alone is, with memory. And now we're to the point now with my oldest, each morning, daily confessions based on, what we're doing in life, little things like that. When you have a child that confident with literacy, I'm telling you, that no one can break that. No one can break that. When you have a child that's had all of those experiences, that comes with confidence. We have so many children who are just struggling with reading, and the pandemic really showed that. You had children who were in their homes, and some kids don't have books at home. They depend on the public library. They were closed. You depend on your school library. They're closed. Okay, your school may have the scholastic book orders that cost money, so you may not have that. You have children that maybe for 6 months or so did not touch a book, did not physically touch a book. So, there's resources out there to help, with that too. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there are resources out there where you can just go and get a book for free. You don't have to check it out. You don't have to worry about not being able to get it because you've got an overdue fee, or you worry about, you're not going to be able to do it because, we lost a book and I got to pay for the book. I don't have any money. There are resources to get things to your children.
So that's going to segue into, you wrote a national grant. So let's talk about that national grant and what all it involved, and the different ins and outs and workings of that.
With an organization I'm a part of, I wrote a grant to put a reading corner in a homeless shelter. And with the reading grant, the focus was to put it somewhere that wasn't in a school, because schools have limits. As we saw with COVID, they're not open on the weekends. They're not open in the summer. They can be closed for snow days. So that's not something that's easily accessible to children. And so it had to be something that was open on the weekends, that children could have after hours. And we have so many children in our country that are homeless. A lot of times as adults, when we think of homeless, we think of someone on the street, when really homeless is you don't have your own physical address. And some people get offended by that, especially in our culture where we tend to have multi-generational living. But we have a lot of children that are homeless. So when you think of a child, you move from place to place, you may get evicted, you may be in a shelter. If you had anything, you don't have it now. So with this grant, my focus was partnering with the local school system, because a lot of people don't know about federal law, that if your child is attending a school and you become homeless, by law, that school cannot put your child out. Now, you may have to do a little bit more to get them there, but your child cannot be forced to move because you've been evicted. Now, if you choose to move them because you're somewhere else now and it's just easier for you to be there, that's fine. But you don't have to remove your child from their school because you've been evicted and you're now homeless and don't live in that zone. Your child can still legally, federally live, continue at that school. So what I did was partnered with the local school system to make sure that the books in the reading corner were similar to the reading program that the school system is doing. Because a lot of times those children have books, they have things that they're doing, and then they, for whatever reason, they're homeless and now they don't have access to that. So I wanted to make sure that they still had access to those materials. We also put a part in the grant where they had take-home bags. So when your family finally got housing, you were given a little book, a bag full of books, age appropriate on grade level, for you to take and start your own library at home. We also partnered with the national organization that does the Little Free Library, and that's a website, littlefreelibrary.org, that puts little libraries in different places across the community. So we have it outside of the shelter, which is housed in part of a church, so that children in the community, can access that. And that's real easy. You can just walk up to it and take a book. You don't have to return it. You don't have to bring a book to get a book. You can just get a book. So again, just wanting to see children exposed to pictures, to letters, to numbers, to stories, and really working with the parents in the shelter to be comfortable with reading. You'd be surprised how many parents struggle themselves with reading. And because of that, they're not reading that chapter book when their child's 4. They're not reading to their child before they go to bed. But there's so many things online now, if you can, that will read to your child for you, or, partnering with other, organizations or people at school that will set you up with an older buddy for your child that will read to your child. So we kind of had to work with some of the parents there to get over their own insecurities with literacy, to encourage them to read to every child loves to be read to. I don't care who it is. Every child loves to be read to. So we really wanted to encourage parents and kind of give them hope, a fresh start, And again, early literacy for children who come in typically just so far behind. If you go to 4 different schools in one school year, there's going to be little success, truthfully. That many people, that many transitions, different teachers, your records going from place to place. So if you can do what you can when they're not in the schoolhouse, that's helpful.
So I have to do my due diligence because it's called the McKinney-Vento program, which is for SERF students who are considered homeless. Homeless does not mean you don't have a roof over your head. Like you said,
That's
homeless
right.
means you could be doubling up, you could be tripling up, whatever it is, you're in temporary housing. So I did have to say that Fayette County Public Schools does a very good job with our McKinney-Vento program and our students and families that we serve. So I had to put that in there. So I guess a couple of weeks ago, I did a workshop for your youngest daughter's grade group.
Yes.
And they were learning to develop their little author skills and illustrator skills and things of that nature. So what other types of projects are you working on right now? I know you got some things planned.
Yes, always have some things planned. Now what I'm working on is working with local charter schools, for charter schools to start putting these little libraries in communities, and also setting up reading corners in other nonprofits that have children, like, for example, the Boys and Girls Club. Some of the after school buildings that they have here in the area where there's no reading corner. So you have charter schools that have the funding that now want to be a part of that. That is, I think, our biggest weapon against children not having literacy skills. Foundations have to do more. Nonprofits have to do more. Schools have to do more. Churches need to do more to really make sure children are getting things in their hands. And there's money for that. There's money out there. You just need someone or a group of people who are willing to do whatever to make that happen. And the charter school that I'm going to be working with is actually south of Baltimore. So this is a totally different area. It's actually a teacher that was the first grade teacher when I was an administrator, who's now over a charter school. So we're partnering with them and 2 other charter schools to begin to put these reading corners in areas for children who otherwise just wouldn't have it. We take books for granted. We take number sense for granted. And number sense, I mean, that can be telling time. Start early with that with your child. Counting money, start early with that with your child. Measuring things. You can do that in the kitchen. You know, little things like that. You know, timing yourself when you do stuff. There's so many little things you can do in your home that are part of your day-to-day activities that if you get your child involved in, you're setting them up for success when they come to school, including, and one thing that I have to admit that I wasn't really good about, that I didn't think about, was the science aspect. And I saw that with my oldest when she got to school, her hesitancy with science. So I've made a point to be more intentional when we're outside and outdoors, and when there's storms and there's snow and the clouds and bugs and planting flowers, all of those things, talking about the little things that you're doing, because she really wasn't a fan of science. But she has a teacher this year who has really, really sparked her interest. And we actually took the girls away last week for their spring break. And she talked about that teacher the entire time. All the stuff that she saw in the sky, all the stuff she saw in the area, and she kept talking about that teacher, talking about that teacher, talking about the teacher. I sent the teacher email this week when we got back. I said, if you can give me a quick call, I need 5 minutes. Won't keep you long. Of course, anytime a teacher calls a parent, you're somewhat prepared for possibly not, you don't know what the call's about. But this was a situation where I just wanted to call the teacher and say, you know what, I just want to thank you. You sparked a love of science for my daughter. She talked about you the entire spring break. She was able to name things that luckily my husband knew because I didn't. She was talking about things. So I just want to thank you for doing that, because, teachers need to hear that too. When you have that teacher that goes above and beyond, if you can just write a little note of appreciation, call and say thank you, that truly makes it a partnership, because you need them, but they need you too. Teachers, they want to connect with you as well.
So if you were to give a word of advice to parents who are wanting to advocate more for their children, and who want to get more comfortable about speaking to teachers and building those relationships so that they can advocate, what kind of advice would you give them, maybe if they've never done it before?
First, if you know someone who has done it before, connect with that person. Kind of prepare yourself in advance. If you know that, your cousin always is involved in their child's school, call and see what they're doing. If you know someone who's in the school system, call them for support. Don't feel like you have to figure it all out yourself. So that when you make that step, you're comfortable with what you're doing. Because you want to be prepared too. You know the steps to take. And if you're not sure who you need to call, if nothing else, there are people in your child's building that you're going to need to know every year. That's the school counselor, going to need to know them every year. Social worker, need to know them every year. If you could just start off with those two, I wanted to get more involved. My child has this teacher, there's other teachers as well. So, maybe you can point me in the right direction. Use people, use your resources within that building beyond the teacher. I also recommend that you, if you can, at some point in the year, also try to make some type of contact with every teacher your child has, even the art teacher. It's possible your child does amazing things in art and you have no idea, because the art teacher is usually not included in the parent conference. The music teacher is usually not there. The PE teacher is usually not there. It's usually just a classroom teacher. And if they have a teacher for reading and for math, usually that one teacher reads everybody's report. That's something that they did in middle school this year with my oldest that I wasn't used to. You met with the advisor and then the advisor read everybody's report. And I said, that's fine. And then based on that, who I felt like I needed to speak to, I still made contact. So, make sure you're talking to everybody. I know who the librarian is, the music teacher, the art teacher. I know who they are because they too can give you information and insight on your child that you didn't know. But use any resource you have. Now, if you're comfortable initially addressing the teacher, that's fine. But if not, call the social worker, call the counselor. You can also call the principal too. There's nothing wrong with calling the principal, saying, I just wanted to introduce myself. My child's in 3rd grade and we're excited about the year. And I just wanted to connect and know I'm here to support the school and your program as best I can, because everybody can't do it the same way. Some parents you're not going to see at a PTA conference. Some parents you're not going to see at an after school event. They have to work. They just can't do it. But that's your way of just letting them know I'm here for my child as best I can. If you need me, if you have concerns, reach out. So don't wait until there's an issue. This year's been challenging because of COVID, but next year, if your child's back in school in August, start that immediately. And it could be email at that point, hi, I'm so-and-so, just want to introduce myself. My child's going to be in your class this year. It can be small. It can be small. And you can just call the teacher and say, hey, I'm just calling to check in. Doesn't have to be a problem. Just make sure they know who you are and they know that you're available. Because teachers sometimes, as you said, you get a bad rap. A lot of times the frustration is, I'm going above and beyond and you're not doing your part.
Right.
You're not doing what you said you were going to do. Now I'm doing all this and you're not doing anything. Now I'm not going to stop it because it's not right for the kid. But if I can get a parent who's doing everything they said they're going to do, and I'm doing everything I said I was going to do, we can really take off. We can really change things. But everybody, has to do your part. And like any relationship, sometimes there's bumps. Sometimes there's bumps. Sometimes there's teachers that you're going to connect with. It's going to be amazing and you're going to have a great year. Sometimes there's teachers, it's just not really flowing. And, you have to be transparent. I've had those too. Just as a parent, I've had to say, I know we see things differently. But, in an effort to maintain positive working relationships. And then, I share whatever it is, especially if my child's out, because sometimes I may have concerns about what the teacher's doing, but my daughter loves the class. My daughter loves the teacher. So, I got to kind of work around that as best I can. But, sometimes it'll be easy. Sometimes it's not. If your child has 2 or 3 teachers and there's one that you really get along with, make sure you utilize that teachers, because teachers know that too. And they're willing to work with teachers. And as your child gets older, middle school, high school, they have an advisor, they have a counselor. Make sure you know those people. Don't be intimidated. They want to hear from you. They want you to call. They want you to email. They want to know that you care too. It's empowering the teachers to know, okay, your mom wants what's best for you. Your mom's going to be checking in. Your mom wants to see what's happening, or your dad or your grandmother. Like I said, when I was a teacher, there's some kids, I never met their parents. I only dealt with the grandmother. That's fine. I'll take the grandmother. I'll take the grandmother. If it's an aunt, I'll take the aunt. I just need I need somebody to stay connected, to know what this child needs.
That's good.
I was thinking about, even in the Zoom age, Zoom actually makes it easier when a parent.
So much easier. Right.
Carve out the time to be on Zoom, because if you can carve out the time to be on Facebook, you can carve out the time to be on Zoom. See, now I went somewhere that I'm not, we weren't trying to go there, but it's the truth.
Right.
If you can spend all the time on social media, you can call your kid's teacher. You can go log into what we call Infinite Campus. You can look at the records. You can do all those things, because we can do everything with our phones.
Right.
We can't blame the school for everything.
You cannot.
Learning starts at home. We know that the first teachers are in the home, and we've said that time and time again.
And Charlize,
you can't expect educators. You should be able to, but you cannot expect everybody to have the same goals and standards for your child that you have. You can't put that on them. So I'm involved, not because, and I tell teachers this too, because some get a little taken aback. I'm not micromanaging you. I have goals for my daughters. I want to make sure those happen. So if they don't happen, it won't be because I didn't do my part. So when I ask you questions, I need you not to think that I'm always questioning you. Sometimes I'm actually trying to get information to make sure that I'm prepared to do what needs to be done. If my daughter's having trouble, for example, my youngest was having an issue with something in math, and I told the teacher, and they were virtual for 2 weeks. I told the teacher, during math, I'm going to be in the room. You won't see me, but I'm in the room. I'm right next to her, because I need to know how you're teaching her this, because I don't want to teach her how I teach it. And then when she gets to you, she still can't do what you need her to do. So I'm going to be in there listening to you so that I can make sure that I support what you are doing in the classroom. That completely changed things for the teacher. I mean, that's just completely, because a lot of times it's, my child's not struggling in math, fix it. No, let me find out what you're doing it, so I can do it just the way that you want to do. And it's okay. It's okay. And sometimes people are, I'm going to be honest, sometimes people are put off when parents are that involved. Hey, this is your child. I'm going to be with you with my child as a teacher for 1 year. If she's 18 and can't read, people are going to be talking about me. They're not going to be talking about you. So I have over here, I got to make sure that we got things tight. So I'm going to call you. I'm going to email you if I have a question. This is just what I'm going to do. And it's a partnership.
That's it. Okay, Yolanda, what were you asking?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to point, though, to something that you said that I think is critically important. You said that when parents are working with the school system and with teachers and with administrators, that they have to recognize that you can't put everything on the school. And I must stop and really acknowledge that point, because I think that that's something that we've seen a lot of, particularly during COVID. I think that what happened was parents got very frustrated, and my heart definitely goes out to parents, but they got very frustrated because they began to realize that all these years they've been somewhat hypercritical of teachers, and then they found out how difficult it is to teach their children by trying to do it at home themselves. But I think when you make the point about blaming the school and blaming teachers a lot, one thing that I've noticed is that kids really, really, really listen to what we say about their progress when it comes to school. And here is the fact: if your kiddos, your children hear you bashing the teachers and blaming everything on the teachers, that's going to put this thing in them to where they will not be as accountable. They will mimic your behavior and say, oh, it's the teacher's fault, or the teacher doesn't like me, or whatever. So I think that it's very important for parents to really realize, like what you said, which is just that, yes, there are times that there may be bumps in the road, just as Melissa said as well. but it's important that we're not always bashing teachers.
That's
It's
right.
important that we're not always saying, I'm gonna go to that school and I'm gonna tell them off.
Right.
You know, some of that stuff that we hear joked about, even on
Right.
Facebook,
Right.
that it's not healthy. And I know that for myself, I just must say, and I've told you this before, Charlize, I came from a different kind of background because my father was the type of person that if I tried to come home and tell him what a teacher didn't do, he automatically flipped it back to me. Like I would say, Daddy, I honestly am not even being funny. I really think the teacher doesn't like me. And he says, but are you going to do the work and perform? And I'm like, did he just hear me say that I don't think the teacher likes me? But what he was teaching me was that this is not a popularity contest. She was my teacher, not my best friend. And that I just needed to make sure that I did what I was supposed to do. He held me accountable to that. And there were times that I thought, well, he's just being plain mean. But as I got older, I began to see, even now that I'm in grad school, I'm likely to take accountability quicker than anything, because it was instilled in me that my education is my responsibility.
Yes, it is. That's
even
right.
As a second grader, it was. I'm going, you know, well, Daddy, you know, she didn't let me take my book home, and that's why I didn't learn what I was supposed to learn. What do you mean she didn't let you take the book home? Well, I didn't finish reading in class, and she wouldn't let me take it home. He actually asked me one time, I'll never forget it. Well, why didn't you say something? If it's taking you a little bit longer to read the longer books, and that's what it was. It was third grade and the books had chapters. He said, why didn't you say something to us? We would have bought the book for you or got it from the public library so you could bring it home for 2 weeks. Right. And I'm like, well, what about her? You know, but Daddy wasn't having it. Daddy was like, no, if you can't figure it out, if plan A doesn't work, okay, it's taking you a little longer to read. I get it. That's okay. But I need you to talk to me, and I need you to be using your brain to think of how you can fix the situation. So I just think I'm glad he did that. It's critically important, I think.
Right. And that goes back to connecting with the teacher early on in the year. Because if you can have that pleasant conversation at the beginning of the year when she doesn't even have enough time to know your child, when those bumps come, it's a lot easier. Because it's hard as a teacher when the only time I hear from you is when you're mad and you're complaining about something and you're accusing me of something and what I didn't do for your kid. And you'd be surprised, just as an example, especially now with technology, the example you just gave as a parent, if you email a teacher nowadays, because nowadays you have email, and say, you know, my daughter said that she didn't have enough time with that book. You know, can you let me know the name of it? I'm going to buy it to make sure she has it in class. I'm sure that you didn't know. You know, the teacher may be like, oh, okay. So now I know that if I send it home, somebody's actually going to help her with it. If I send it home, somebody's going to actually do something with it. Because if somebody's going to do something with it, I'll send it home. If I send it home and it gets lost, but somebody helped her, that's fine. I'll replace it.
Right.
So, you know, just again, just making sure you're in the constant contact. And people say all the time, oh, you know, I don't want to get on their nerves. I'm sure they're tired of hearing from me. Okay, well, you know, this is just what it is. You're going to hear from me all the time. If I have questions, now my daughter being in middle school, and this is important for parents too. Now, when she has an issue, I have her email the teacher herself. Now, she doesn't know that I come around behind her and also email the teacher. But she may say, I was doing this, this, and this. Miss so-and-so said this. I wasn't sure. Send her an email. She'll email, hello, you know, we talk about what the subject should be, say what the problem is, and email your teacher, send it to your teacher. Now I'll come back around and say, just let you know, Audrey's going to email you today because we did this, this, and this. I told her to reach out to you because I know that you are more than willing to support her. She's able to express what her needs are. After speaking with her, if there's anything else I can do to support, I say to the teacher, if there's anything I can do to support you in your efforts to help Audrey, please let me know. That empowers teachers. Then it's not about, I want Audrey to have this. You tell me what I have to do to help her, because I know that helps you. So that's also teaching my daughter now, advocate for yourself.
That's it.
What are you going to say to her? This is what you need to say. If she has one teacher, I said, so how are you going to handle this? Are you going to address the teacher? So the teacher says they have 2 help sessions blocked out in their schedule each week. The teacher said every Tuesday, stop in to see me. If we don't have anything to go over, we'll say that. But just in case, you'll meet with me. I'm telling you, teachers will meet you if they see you're going the extra mile. If you're going to be consistent and follow through, they will support you.
That's it.
Good. Very good.
So as we're closing out our session, I have a few round robin questions. I'm only going to ask you a couple of those. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so what's your favorite children's book?
Favorite children's book. Ooh. I have so many. Wait a minute, let me
Just
think.
name them, because what's going to happen is parents are going to watch this and they're probably going to go look them up and order them on Amazon anyway. We have a lot of that.
Maybe now it might be actually that one I just sent you, The Power of Her Pen.
Mm.
The story of Ethel Payne. I think that's one that I really liked. That was done really well. Representation matters, and there's so many things about African American history that our children are never taught. So I always say it's our responsibility to do so. So that's so beautifully written. I would probably say that one right now.
That's good. So what has been your favorite educational place to take your children? Because they've been everywhere.
They have. I think it's still the library. I think it's still the public library.
I love that.
I still the thought that there's a public place where anyone can go and learn anything they want to learn. You just have to be resourceful. You go in, you take your time. The materials are there. There are people walking around eager to help you. You can learn more than you thought you would learn. There's everything in there in the library. There's toys if you've got a toddler. There's computers if you need computers. There's books. There's art supplies. There's activities. I think it's still the public library at the end of the day.
And it's so funny, I think about that. And my mom was the one that wanted to take the girls to the library. My niece, my daughter.
And actually, the last time I was in Versailles, I went to the public library and ran into your mother.
It's so funny.
Actually,
she wanted to take them. She and my Aunt Merlin. And when my daughter came home with her little library card, she thought it was a credit card. She was so happy about that.
I was happy. Oh man.
Yes.
Such good memories, y'all. Like when you talk about the library, I can't believe the great memories that it brings up for me. Right. This is amazing.
Bookmobile.
I loved it.
Yes,
I loved it. Yes.
If you could go back in time and meet someone, who would it be?
My goodness. Anybody?
Anybody.
Probably my great grandmother.
Wow.
Her name was America. I think of her often. Sometimes I think about how amazed she would be by my life. When you think about what her struggles may have been, and to see how I live, I think it would, though I know she knows, for her to just in the physical realm see that her prayers were answered and God has kept her family through generations as he promised.
Amen. Amen. That's good right there.
That's beautiful.
It is. It really is. So if you could go anywhere in the world on vacation tomorrow, where would it be?
Africa.
Africa.
My daughters know I want to go. I want to see that place. I want to see where our people came from. I always tell my daughters, I'm really big on this. Our story did not start with slavery.
Thank you.
When you are in school, when they talk about people who look like us, they will start with slavery. That's where our stories start in this country. That is not our story before we came here. So you don't think of, your ancestors were slaves. Your ancestors were doctors who came here and we were enslaved. Lawyers who came here and were enslaved. Kings and queens who came here and were enslaved. Yeah. So you came from brilliant, talented, resourceful, educated people who were bought somewhere and enslaved against their will. But that's not where our story begins.
That's good. All right, Yolanda, I'm kicking it to you because that was good.
Well, ladies, this has just been an incredible show. Melissa, I just want to thank you again. Just the information that you've given, I swear I could talk to you for a really long time. I'm very talkative. You are so resourceful. And what I love is the way that you empowered parents on this podcast. Anyone who was listening, anyone who was looking on Facebook, anyone who will listen or look on YouTube, I know that they will immediately have something that you said that they can implement right away. And that's what I love about how you did this, the practicality of it all. And you taught us a thing about intentionality. I don't know that you ever said the word intentionality, but everything that you talked about was about being intentional and making sure that that our kids are better and better equipped. And so for that, I just want to thank you. And I'm so grateful that you are here. And I also want to thank all of you, our listeners, folks who are joining us on Facebook Live, who will be looking at us on YouTube or listening to our podcast. Thank you so much. We are so grateful to be able to continue to shape our dialogue around real life issues and real talk solutions. You can find and subscribe to our podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. You can also find us on our Facebook page. Please join us next time as we strive to be authentic, be transparent, and be inspired. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.